over the last few weeks, I've been building what I would consider my dream Nova, a 4x4 build with a 2-litre turbo. So in the last episode, we spent quite a lot of time mounting this shortened 4x4 coilover axle. And in today's episode, I want to concentrate on fitting these Nissan S13 coilovers to the rear. Now, the traditional Cavalier or Cleaver uses this kind of suspension on the back. So it's got a spring on the wishbone and a shock absorber on the wishbone. This bolts at the bottom and then goes through into the floor, and that's it. Quite simple. They work, but something like this is going to be a lot better. Now, this is just a cheap eBay special coilover. What's good about it is, obviously, the spring is adjustable, so you can adjust the preload. It's got 12 different dampening settings, but also, which I really do like, and you don't see this on the European one so much, you can adjust the bottom. So you can adjust the height essentially without changing the preload on the spring. So you still get the adequate amount of dampening travel. You're not compromising on anything like that, and the spring preload's still the same. So I really like that, and it's got a few inches of adjustment, so that's going to help me. So obviously this lot doesn't just fit. It doesn't fit at all, if I'm honest. So we're going to have to make it work. And as we've got all this massive space, that shouldn't be too difficult, I'm hoping. So let's crack on with it. So I've been having a bit of a play, and I think the shock absorber needs to be mounted pretty much vertically. The reason for that is this, when it goes up, should compress nicely. Hope you can see that. I think if I try and put it at like this kind of angle, it might try and bend the shock, and it's also going to interfere with the drive shaft. So from looking at it, I think pretty much horizontal should do the job nicely. So how am I going to mount it? Well, my plan is I'm going to reinforce this section here on both sides exactly the same. Now this bit here on both sides is symmetrical. As you go further forward, it gets slightly different because there's a fuel neck on the other side, but this bit's bang on. So because I want this horizontal, I'm going to reinforce this with some 2mm plate. Then I'm going to bring basically a channel coming off here, which is going to act as my top. And then I've got, believe it or not, a Mk7 Transit wheel arch to then fill the gap up. Now, that might sound a bit hard to understand, so I'm just going to show you. So funnily enough, when I eBay searched 4x4 Nova, it turns out Transit arches and Land Rover Discovery boot floors actually fit these cars, which I was really surprised about. So I've got some of them bought. Anyway, how did I fit everything? Well, I started off by cutting this little bit of panel out here and then reinforcing it with some 2mm. Now the plate's a bit old and rusty, so I decided I'd just give it a sand first and then a coat of X primer just to protect it. And I also gave the backside some gloss paint as well. So once dry, I welded it into place after doing a little bit of panel beating and cleaning up first. I tagged it in to start off with, then I buzzed it all up properly. Then I gave it a good grind down and a coat of X primer. Right, now that's all done, next job I need to make some kind of channel what comes out of here. So I was looking through the scrap bin and I found this, which I've just trimmed the edge off and just tidied it up a little bit. But that is a 5-inch channel, which is exactly what I need really. So that should bolt through there like so. Obviously this isn't going to be the final thing, it's going to need reinforcement a lot more than this, but you get the idea. So this needs quite a lot of work to transform it from a bit of scrap to a turret strut tower. So start off by marking it exactly where I need it to be cut with a permanent marker and a set square, and then I also mark where the strut's going to be and the hole centres, etc, etc, and where the hole needs to be for the centre of the strut. I take quite a lot of time doing this because I want it to be absolutely perfect. And then I use a centre punch on the marks and drill the holes out. Drill a 50mm hole in the middle and then two 8.5mm holes. And once that's all done, I dress it all down with a flap disc on a grinder and a drill and go over the whole thing with a file. And then cut the end off with a grinder to the exact length I want it to be. So there we go, it fits absolutely lovely. So I bolt it up tight, and as you can see, the bent over piece I'd already drilled some holes in. I use these to plug weld it to the metal plate I've already welded to the chassis. And then I seam weld down the side. Finally, I stitch weld all the way around it. Now this is like an inch weld, inch gap, inch weld. What they're doing rally cars, and the idea is it allows the metal to flex. Next up, rear panel. Now this rear panel is rotten, and as you can imagine, it isn't going to work with my Land Rover Discovery floor and my Transit wheel arches. So I need to remove it, get it out of the way, because it's not very nice, it's a bit nasty. So I cut it all out with a grinder and look at all this rust. It's in really poor condition, one of the worst bits of the car. Obviously, it doesn't add that much strength anyway, so I've never been that bothered about it, but I'm very pleased it's going. I then trim back a bit more of the original inner arch and weld on another piece of angle iron, the strut tower. As you can see, I've cut this at a certain angle, so it doesn't fit parallel with the strut. However, it does fit vertically, which is what I want, and I think that's going to look more aesthetically pleasing once it's all done. Next job's the transit wheel arch. Now this is a Mk7 Transit wheel arch. They all look pretty similar if I'm honest, but I found the dimensions of this is going to work quite well on the Nova, and it's going to give me plenty of tyre spaces, which is what I want. To start off with, I measure it all up, mark it, and then cut it to size roughly, and I also trim a little bit more off the car so it fits in. Once I'm happy with the rough fitment, I make up a panel, which is essentially going to follow the original shape of the Nova arch and then join up to the transit arch. Obviously, the transit arch is like a hexagon, essentially, a half hexagon. Nova arch is round. So this is going to allow me to fill that gap in. It's also going to give me something to plug weld the arch to. I clean the body up, mark up where the arch needs to be, and then tack the panel into place. I then make a little filling panel for this little piece of corner because the profile of the arch means it's just going to skim that. We don't want any holes. So I weld it all up, grind it all flat with a grinder and a flat disc, and that looks loads better and it's already a lot stronger. The next job was to make a little lip that the arch could spot weld onto. Now, reason for this is I think it makes it stronger, it looks a little bit more factory, and it's going to give the whole thing a bit more rigidity. So what I do, I use some 2mm plate once again and then bend it to match the profile, the curve shall we say, and tack it into place. Then buzz it all up and away we go. So that is the rear arch done, and I think it looks pretty good if I'm honest. I'm pretty chuffed with it. Obviously, I've still got a lot more to do, so we need to put a chassis leg down here, which is going to tie this turret tower into the back panel. And we're also going to put a cross member across here, which is going to act as a bit of a lower strut brace, but it's also got to hold the back of the diff. So that's going to give it a lot of strength, that is. But for now, I'm going to carry on with the front of the arch. The first thing I need to do is start filling this section in here. So whenever we make templates, we use CAD, which is Cardboard Aided Design. So I've got a bit of scrap cardboard out of the recycling bin, and I mark it with a Sharpie. Cut it all out, and then we transfer it to the steel. Finally, I cut this out with a 1mm cutting disc, then clean it all up with a flat disc. And there we go, perfect fit, first time, just the way we like it. Now let's tack it into place. So some people are going to say this isn't going to be strong enough, and I think it is. It's 2mm thick, which is the thickness of most strut towers. It's also going to have a solid cross member mounted to it, chassis legs, as well as a big strut brace. So here's the other bit of the transit arch. Now obviously I do not need it to be that big, so I'm going to trim it down a little bit. And the beauty of that is as well, I can remove the Ford badge, as you can see there. I don't think you purists are going to like that, are you? So I mark it all up and cut roughly 5 or 6 inches out of the centre. This gets rid of the Ford badge and also makes it about the right length that it would have been originally, taking into account the strut tower. I then use a spirit level to mark a perfect level line on the bottom of the turret. Now this is to line up with the bottom of the wheel arch. Now the reason I'm doing that is because, see, the wheel arch is cut in half, and I want this to remain true all the way through. So I don't want it to be leaning up one side, for example. So I want a nice level line so I can line both sides up with it, make it fit just right. I then make a front infill panel similar to the rear one, so this follows the profile of the Nova arch and the profile of the transit arch. I weld it to the Nova arch, so then I can spot weld the new transit arch onto it. Again, I treat up the back before I do this to stop it rusting. I then spend quite a long time with some 60 grit sanding down the turret tower. Yes, it is flexing a little bit, do not worry, it's not going to flex when it's welded to the arches. That looks loads better, doesn't it? And with the arch clamped into place, and I'm not going to weld them yet because I want to make sure the chassis legs are made first. So there we go, that's an S13 rear coilover mounted custom turret transit wheel arches in a Vauxhall Nova. Obviously it's not completely finished, I still need to spot weld these on, still need to make a lip on this side like I did here, but you get the idea. So I think in the next video what we're going to do is concentrate on mounting the back of the diff, back of the axle shall we say. We're going to make a cross member that goes across and some chassis legs hopefully. That's my next plan, all being well. So one more quick thing before I go. My last video had quite a lot of views, it did fairly well, I was pleased with it. Hope you guys liked it. But I noticed 70% of you guys that viewed it hadn't subscribed. So if you haven't subscribed, please click it. It's completely free to do so, and it will help my channel grow. And the more the channel grows, the more content I can keep making for you guys, because stuff like this costs quite a lot of money, and I'm just doing this in my spare time. It's a bit of fun, but you know, it's expensive and it costs a lot to fund it. So any help from you guys by simply just clicking the subscribe button, liking the video, leaving a comment, even sharing it with your friends, anything like that will help massively. So if you could, I'd really appreciate it. Right, that's it for today's video. See you next week, and goodbye. Don't forget to subscribe.